the ancient times, there was no separation. The idea that you would have science that didn't include the activation, the conscious activation and application of sexual energy would be stupid. It wouldn't occur. You want to build a Merkut, which is the original word for the pyramids. You want to build that? You can't do it without breathing sexual energy into it. I mean that literally.
This podcast videocast series is The Sexual Shaman, Conversations on Sexuality and Spirituality. I am your host, Kenneth Stubbs. This series is inspired by a book I envisioned, contributed to, edited, and published 30 years ago, entitled Women of the Light, the New Sacred Prostitute. This current podcast videocast is a series of conversations with both women and men of the light, all about sexuality and spirituality. Here we openly support all sexual orientations, all genders, all gender identifications, all races, all ethnicities, but not all creeds, such as white supremacy. Okay. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Sexual Shaman podcast, Conversations on Sexuality and Spirituality. And my guest today is Tmu-Ankh Butterfly Dreaming. That's, I'll shorten that and call her Nut. To give a label, she is an ordained priestess in the Nubian-Khamite tradition. And first I want to explain how I met Nut. I wrote a book called Sacred Orgasms, which later was compiled and put into a compilation with Tantra publishers as the Essential Tantra. But when I first wrote it, it was Sacred Orgasms. And someone took an excerpt, a few pages, and put that on their website. Nut saw it, liked it, emailed me, and we struck up a conversation and then a friendship, and then began to learn about her background. And so here I was into Western Tantra, although a lot of that influence had come from Tibetan Buddhist or Tantric Buddhist traditions, rather than the Hindu or India Tantric traditions. But my perspective was that probably many different cultures, particularly in more ancient times, had included sexuality as a part, ceremonially, of the spiritual practice. So a huge general perspective. And what we were calling it at the time was Tantra, as a catch-all term. We meaning people into the spiritual growth and looking at the ways that we could deepen ourselves, our sexuality and our spirituality. So, new contexts, and I thought, oh my goodness, I bet there's some sort of idea like this in an African cultural tradition. And so, well, I'm not going to be able to get to Los Angeles easily, being quadriplegic. And so I invited Nut to come out here to Tucson, 500 miles or so away, and to set up a seminar for her so I could learn about her tradition and how she was exploring sexuality and spirituality and whatever else she was exploring. So Nut comes out. And I just want to give you, for those who are in the podcast rather than the videocast version, a sense of what I saw. One of the times she was coming in the airport in Tucson, she was walking over to the greeting area, coming off the airplane area. And here she was in, I wouldn't say full regalia, but she was at a blue or red shawl, I think it's blue, maybe green, and sort of a I think she has some sort of headdress on with her, as you see here on her forehead, her ankh, beautifully painted or drawn. And the way I would describe her is in like 6 words: tall, moving stately, and the colloquial expression, black and beautiful. She was a sight. She was a sight. And we have over the years become very good friends. And so when she came out to Tucson, she picked up a stone before she went back to Los Angeles, her hometown. She was really drawn to the Sonoran Desert and decided to move here. She talked about it. And one day I get up, I'm in a wheelchair, quadriplegic, and go into my kitchen. Newt was standing there. One of my caregivers, Richard, had driven his truck out to Los Angeles, and picked up her belongings and moved her out here to Tucson, or as the Tohono O'odham people have referred to this as Tucson. Anyway, so Newt, welcome. She is an awesome person. She is I often go to her for her perspective. We have different energetic patterns, and she has different energetic abilities than I have, and I love getting her perspective. So, Newt, welcome.
That was great.
All right, so that
was great.
That is my imagery of one of your visits. Just whoa.
That kitchen in the morning, you forgot to mention it wasn't just me. It was me, my then 12-year-old son, and our dog.
All right.
We had all snuck into your house in the middle of the night.
I had no idea, and I had to do a double take. Am I awake? She was standing in the kitchen. So, and we spent many Thanksgiving and Christmas times and other events sharing food. It was not to celebrate any Christmas tradition, but that's when people got together. And Thanksgiving time is when people got together. So we got together. Always some tortilla chips and salsa. So
collard green, sweet potato pie, and I think
yes.
I said you hot water cornbread too.
Yes. She turned me on to some. I have a Southern background, and some of that food, although not so much sweet potato pie, but it was yummy. So, Newt, I would really like for you to give us a sense of how you sum up your perspective of your Nubian-Khamite tradition. Just to have most people have heard the word Nubian, probably, because it appears in movies. But you're talking about a very, very old, rich culture predating. In fact, you were saying that a lot of the pharaohs in Egypt we were associating with Nubian culture to some extent.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And it may, I get the impression it may have been much more Black African than sort of lighter skinned Middle Eastern at that time. Anyway, I'd just love for you to go into that. A whole different.
There were no lighter skinned Middle Easterners at that time.
Okay.
That's a recent development. Like really, there just weren't. How do I sum up that culture? In terms of Nubia, the reason that I always state it that way, because I want to state that influence is what gives us the grand culture that we recognize as quote unquote ancient Egypt today. Long before there was an Egypt. And Kemet, or Taui was what they like to call the nation when they got everybody together, when they got the upper, happy, now called Nile River which is the southern part. When they got the upper together with the lower, which is the northern part, and all the lands to either side, there were unifications periodically throughout time, but they didn't last because, if you ever tried to get more than 3 people to do anything for any period of time, it doesn't stay for very long. So imagine that with several dozen different principalities, different cultures with their own lineages and their own desires to rule. And they didn't unify very often. But the influx that gave us the whoosh that we recognize, that's the Nubian influx. That's the Nubian influence. There's Nuba and there's Kush, which the vestiges of Kush are now in what's called Ethiopia and Eritrea. Those cultures are, the word Nub in the language means gold. So the Nubians are literally the people who had the gold. People who knew where gold was, who had the knowledge of gold, who had the mastery of gold. Kush is where there's also gold there, but there are the jewels and everything that made the wonderful eye makeup that is so iconic. The jeweled crowns, all the ceremonial uses for using jewels and crystals as medicine. That's coming from Kush, which is further south. Everything in the culture, everything that they've left, and they've left a lot on scrolls and written in stone, chiseled in the stone, they always refer to the times, the original times from their origin, and they point that way south, where Tanzania is now. So in terms of time, we're talking about a culture that's easily 50,000 years old. Easily.
50?
50. Easily. Because the deities, and I can say that because of the origins of the deities, and I'm bringing it to sexuality, so I'm coming.
Yeah, no, the general perspective is it doesn't fit our school textbook.
No, the school textbook says still, even in 2022, the Western, the American and European and Australian school textbooks say there's nothing in Africa of value except, what they could steal. And now they've taken it all, there's nothing left. So the idea that there's this long culture that's written down. This isn't, I have no problem with oral story and an oral memory tradition. That would be just as valid to me. It just happens that they took the time to chisel this stuff in the stone in many, many different places. So tracing what they say are the oldest energies and identities that they revere. There's an energy that we know as Hetheru. In the west of Africa, she's known as Oshun. Here across the water, she's known as Erzuli. She's known sometimes as Mami Wata. And the Greeks got a hold of her, she became Venus. The Greeks and Romans, she became Venus. She is this energy of fertility, of love, of sexual pleasure, of orgasmic fulfillment. That core energy, the root of her, comes from those way long, old days. The days, she's older than the language that's used to speak her name. She's older than the name that's given to her. And that comes from those deep, at the mountains of the moon, what's called Lake Victoria now, the locals call it Lake Nyanza. That area where archaeologists say the first iron was smelted in these very old pits in Tanzania, way back. That's where that energy comes from. No, that was over here. so what here?
Reality interrupts. We keep going.
I apologize. I meant to stick a thing on the door. But that's the old, very deep origin of African life and civilization, and possibly life period, as far as people are concerned, as far as us two-legged walking upright people. That's where this energy, this deity that represents erotic fulfillment, orgasmic awareness, fertility of everything, not just fertility in terms of babies, but the land, growing crops, growing food, creativity, art, the owner of creation power. That deity is sourced from those old, old days. Days so old, no one remembers the language that they spoke. We just have a few figurines from that time. Or they're probably not even from that time. They're representations taken, what's ancient to us. What we call ancient, they were recalling their ancient origins and fashioning together these figurines and what they think was worship back then. Those are the roots of any kind of, it's hard to say that there's an African version of Tantra. What I teach, Shet Timer, isn't ancient. It's given to me for this time now. Because in the ancient times, there was no separation. The idea that you would have science that didn't include the activation, the conscious activation and application of sexual energy would be stupid. It wouldn't occur. You want to build a Merkut, which is the original word for the pyramids. You want to build that? You can't do it without breathing sexual energy into it. I mean that literally. I've been taught how to build them. You can't build them without breathing sexual energy into it and receiving and identifying that energy from the source materials you're using to build the structure. You can't do it without a physical and energetic, an energetic congress that precedes you building the structure. There has to be a coming together of all the elements, the people coming together to do it, the materials, the elements, and the energies being assembled or intended to be assembled in that creation. The same for math, the same for medicine, the same for... There's a deity, Sekhmet, who is an aspect of that ancient love deity. We'll just call it a love deity. Sekhmet is the patron saint, if you will, of surgery. There is no surgery without sexual energy, without mastering sexual energy. No mastery of that? No, you don't get to cut people open. At least not in this, not this society. It's so elementary and so basic to take it apart and say, okay, now I'm going to study this. It's the through line with everything. It's how you are able to function in a participatory society as a functioning adult. It's a mark of maturity. Erotic mastery is a mark of maturity.
That is a different view of history and spirituality than what I learned in the Southern Baptist Church. Very different.
Well, this is before they wrote any of those things.
Yeah. Yes.
There weren't no Bibles being printed back then.
No, so, could you give some sense of the ritual or ceremonial practices that was more or less practiced, or variations on that? I'm sure it varied over culture over time.
It would.
I'm not
There's
looking
a lot
for
of variances.
Yeah.
There's a lot of variances, but again, it's interwoven in everything.
That's important.
It's interwoven. It's in everything. So there is no. We all know about the Amen priesthood. We don't know them by their name, but they kind of morphed into an organization that still claims that source. The Masons. The Masons claim the Amen priesthood as their source. There's a beautiful Masonic temple here in Los Angeles, right on Wilshire and Crenshaw. Well, Crenshaw ends in Wilshire. I've passed it my entire life. And my entire life, there's this statues in relief all along this very white building. I don't think it's marble, but maybe it is. I don't know. It's very white, and it always is. And growing up here, going north, you get there, and you'd see these relief statues, and I could tell over time, oh, that's a story of where they came from. And the one that's the furthest all the way down on the corner is a statue of the Kemetic deity Amen.
How do you spell that name?
Amen, A-M-E-N, the same way the Baptists say.
Oh, wow. Amen.
That's where they got it.
All right.
That's
Amen.
Amen. Amen is the energy of revelation, but secret revelation. It's the hidden radiance, the radiance you cannot see, but that moves everything in the shadows, which you know is why the Masons really love it. It's the secret society. It's the original secret society, or one of them. We know about that energy, the secrecy and all of that, because they were really popular and they had a lot of political power at that time and since. But what we don't recognize is how interwoven erotic energy mastery had to be in those rites. It literally is in everything. There is, you want to get to the hidden power, where do you think it is? where is the true Amen power? In all of us. It's not in our heads. It's not in our heads. We can get a reflection of it, closing our eyes and meditating. But that true hidden revelation, that hidden radiance, that power that is so great and so big that it would burn our eyes to see it if it was revealed. That's in the groin. That is communicated through the groin, I would say. That's communicated through that, the only parts of us that are designed to even communicate with such power, to even get a glimpse of that power. Those rites are about connecting there. So ancient rites, what we have is what's survived on stone and in things. A lot of what survived, because I guess they wrote a lot about it, were rituals that were done or given, offered to soldiers coming home from war so that they could reintegrate into society. That was a really important thing. I wish we, as a society, would integrate more of that. Even some of it, even a little of that, because it's a different reality to just come off the battlefield and be expected to, go buy groceries. It don't work. And every veteran in the States will tell you that. We don't have to go far to see what the problem is there. So we have documentation of those rites and rituals involving several layers of sacred baths and time with temple priestesses. See, we always talk about temple priestesses, but I'm sure there were priests in there too. This is not a homophobic society at all. So there would have been everybody taking part, as was needed for the energetic reintegration of those warriors. So we have evidence of that, and what we have that I really love, there's a lot of surviving love poetry from this culture.
A lot of surviving what?
Love poetry. There's a lot of love poetry that has been translated by various people into English, so you don't even have to learn to read the language to get to it. But if you can, there are several little books published of ancient Egyptian love poems, which to me gives me much more feel for the society. Because reading about the royals and the high priests and soldiers, that's one thing. But, a woman writing poetry to her husband who's gone off to sell the harvest, and she's waiting for him to come back. They haven't been married that long, and she can't bear to be away from him. That tells me more about the society and how, and the importance, the fact that the love poetry survived means there has to be a lot of it. There has to be a lot of it for it to survive enough for us to have it and have it reprinted in books here in our time. That tells me that just that knowledge of the art of love, the art of maintaining and extending love, and that energetic communion across space. A lot of the poems deal with, it's a common theme, my lover's away from me. And I'm writing these lines and I'm singing this song and I'm communicating this energy to maintain the communion, to maintain the connection. The importance, that tells me that that is a very important practice in the culture. That not just the royals and the high priests, but the farmers, the laborers, the everyday people have a very high mastery of the practice of love. Emotional love, physical love, sexual love, spiritual love.
So the question that I have, a question that I have, is how to, those of us growing up in contemporary society with a whole different mindset, cultural perspective than what you just suggested, and it was going back to some very ancient origins of human incarnation. Where is there a way to learn that, to have more experience in that? Is that even available to us, other than reading books on ancient poetry?
Reading the ancient poetry is a great start.
Right.
I love books, I love reading, but it's not just that. There is an alchemy to the language. Language, Mtu-Ntha, that's what they call the language. There's several different languages, but the thing that we call hieroglyphics was called Mtu-Ntha. Those words mean the sound of divinity. And going to museums is the first thing I would say. Read your books, get them translated so you're not stumped. But find a museum, find an exhibit. Look upon these things that have been created. Everything that's in the museums that was put into, they usually come out of some kind of grave. It's there for spiritual purpose. They are imbued with definite purpose and living alchemy. Go. Look upon them. Pull them up online if you can't get to them. Study. Just look at the first page of my website. There's a beautiful, very ancient, sacred piece that's there. And it's there on purpose. It communicates. Meditate, gaze upon it. Listen to what it's striking up inside of you. It's not so much about learning some foreign thing. It's about sitting with and recognizing what about this is familiar. What about this can I relate to? What about this speaks to me? Whether or not I understand it, what is there something that I see that stirs?
Your website is orgasmicliving.com, since you referred to it. Orgasmicliving.com. If someone would like to pursue that further. I have another question. You, in our interactions in a number of times, you were talking about this orgasmic core. And as you know, I have a lot of interest in energetic anatomy, the part that's not physical and not visible to most of us, most humans. It's not often seen with the eye, although some people might sort of have that experience. Many traditions talk about this, the subtle energies, which are not subtle. Once you get into them, they're not subtle at all. Just sort of, we're not familiar with them. We don't do meditations and practices to enhance our experience and expression of them. Could you speak more to that and related concepts to your orgasmic core? I forget what you called it, but it was something like that. Because I in my own particular evolution of understanding of energetic anatomy, there is a lot going up in that center. For me, it's been about 2 to 6 inches in diameter, energetic currents combined together, very different energetic structures. Can you speak to that from your experience?
I can try. Well, that's not true. I can't try. But I'm trying to remember what I'm trying. I know that's not the word I used. So
I don't remember the word you used.
I'm trying to, like, what's he talking about? So I'm gonna push that to the side. From my understanding, we all are working with at least 7 bodies. And there is one point, I know you used the term source point, so I'll stick with that. There is one point that accesses all of them, where they all combine. And I'd have to stand up for video. It's below the belly button, above the pubic area. And it's not, I'm saying that on the physical body as just a point of reference.
Yeah.
It's not that it lives in the physical body, but as a point of reference, while we're in these bodies, it's useful. And in what I teach men and women to focus there. And we do our work. We ground there. And that's the way to access and consciously become aware of all of the 7 bodies and where we are with them, where we are in our development with them. There are some of the 7 bodies that really just don't give a crap where we are in our development, because they're more absolute than that. We can just kind of back into those. We can't really look head on to that. But even just becoming aware of that there is something like that we can identify, that each of us can identify. There is an absolute that we can identify as me. That there is a greater than me that is also me. And we can, through that point, through focusing on that point, I call it either womb centering or seed focusing. Focusing there, we can begin to become aware of and feel the truth of that, the truth of all of those bodies. But especially that one, because here in America and probably Europe and Australia, where there's so much bombardment. I blame capitalism. There's so much bombardment on the idea of separation, and that we are just little ants doing what we can to stay alive and get some good stuff along the way. And there's nothing greater in us, that we don't have innate access to greatness. Greatness is something that, billionaires have. We don't have it. That's the messaging. And it's a lie. And I love revealing the lie of that. And that's, for me, that's like the funnest and first thing to do with helping someone become aware that first at that point is there. That we have this access point to infinity that we walk around with and we sit on every day. And that there is a very easy way to access it and to play with it. That you can play with. It's yours. Play with it. You can play with your enlightenment. Enlightenment isn't this lofty, serious thing. It's something you can play with. You were meant to play with. All of us are meant to play with.
All right. Yes, I I'm finding this very interesting because I'd never heard you speak before that I remember about that area. My observation in general is there are two areas that we focus, that people focus from, and energetic areas, not physical. One would be in the head area, which is the most common, but the one that I see when I look at the energetic patterns of some traditional shamans and some martial artists, they're focusing their energy from this abdominal, and now I'm hearing, I'd never heard you say it. I don't remember you saying that before.
That's power. Martial arts specifically, that we learn that. We learn that your power, it definitely ain't come up in your head. Nothing. Coming out your head is going to get you killed. You use everything up here as just information input. The power, your kick, your punch.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
So it's got to come from there. So they make us say that. Walk around and say, oops, oops. You got to get there. You got to breathe from there, speak from there, and punch from there.
And of course, that's the physical expression, but the energetic focus.
It's the physical exercise.
Yes.
To become consciously aware of the energetics.
Yeah.
Even in martial arts specifically, it's not about moving bodies. It's about aligning with energy.
Yep.
The goal is that you don't have to move bodies, that your energy is powerful enough that they back off. And if you do have to move bodies, you only have to do it once.
Well, this is very nice to hear that something I had to come to perspective quite independently of your tradition and saying, oh, there's another tradition that is incorporating, including a similar perspective. Yeah, I think that's
gosh, I have to think about it. I know there are ancient paintings of light radiating out of it. I've seen them. I have to scrub my memory, scrub my mind, and remember so I can get them to you. It's really basic. It's really basic. All the sign points in our body tell us that's where the power is. It's why the church, the Christian, early Catholics, and whatever they got going on now, all the variants, why they teach to be afraid of it. It's where all the power is.
Yep. You're not dependent upon the priest or the priestess or the pope for quote liberation or absolution.
No.
It's all within.
No, even our concept of priesthood is, our concept of king and queen is different. Even using these English words kind of gets into trouble because it's not even. I don't know. Well, I kind of know. I know what they're doing, but I don't know what the entire purpose of the Catholic idea of priesthood is. Because it's got nothing to do with what I practice. It's got nothing to do with that. It's not about control or creating rules, even dictating morality. It's about revelation. It's about being a support and a servant for the revelation of those who I'm blessed to serve.
Right. Well, what I'd like to do at this point, given what I've read about podcasts, keeping it at 20 to 30 minutes, what I'd like to do is do a part 2, which will be a continuation for us. But the part 2 would be available on my website, sexualshaman.com. And if you want to hear more of Newt, please do join in. I want to go on and on and on and on. Turn it into a seminar for a couple of days here. Let's get the drum out or get the music moving and move it, and whatever else. But Newt has an incredible amount of knowledge. She does teach seminars and has individual. Do you do individual sessions with people or seminars? Is it
I
mainly
hold initiation.
initiation? All right.
I accept initiates. I don't do individual sessions, and we can talk about that, or they can read it on the website.
Right, cool.
I do have some courses, and
All right. Well, when we come back for part 2, I want to talk to you about what I learned via you about crystals. Because, you have experience, and I stepped into it, and you gave me some good feedback and perspectives. So, Tmu-Ankh Butterfly Dreaming.
we didn't talk about dance. Y'all better tune in. We didn't even get to the good stuff.
Tmu-Ankh Butterfly Dreaming, orgasmicliving.com. And I want to say that for those of you listening to the podcast, if you would like to contribute, this is a free podcast and videocast. Love for you to contribute. Click on the website, sexualshaman.com, at the Be a Patron button, and follow that if you would like to contribute in some way. Also, I would say the sponsor, since we're just beginning, is basically my website, the Sexual Shaman, not secret, but sexualshaman.com, and the energy training, where I go into conveying through a series of one-to-one courses on ways of developing an energetic structure that we're both referring to in various ways, but that energy focuses, which is so important, which to me helps me to transcend traditions, and hearing about these other traditions and saying, whoa, what I grew up with was a very limited perspective of our human nature and energetic nature. So Newt, thank you so much for joining. Orgasmicliving.com if someone wants to go further with you, a study or ideas. And she's also appears in my documentary called The Sacred Prostitute, and from which evolved the term sexual shaman as a broader connotation. So, Newt, anything you want to say before we complete this part 1?
Love yourself. Just love who you is. And anything you want to know will come much more easily to you.
Thank you very much for everybody for joining in. And part 2 will be available if you go to another location. And that other location is sexualshaman.com.